get that going. And it is not asking me, Julia, about putting it on my computer.
Huh.
So let's hope that this is working okay.
I would assume that it's going locally. I think that's the default.
Okay. Do you see it showing recording?
Yes, and it announced itself.
Okay, great. Okay, well, everybody, I know that all of you are aware that we are on the focus discussion group for the non-commercial fishery stakeholders. That we're here to kind of focus in on the commercial sector in our perspectives today on the questions that we go through. But if you have additional ideas, feel free to address those as well. We don't have to totally be focused on the commercial sector. Remember the meeting agreements that were shown up on one of the slides about just being aware of everybody and that we all have our own ideas and those can be freely provided. And you all know I know everybody here. I'm Debbie Haseltine Nielsen. I'm with CDFW. I'm a senior marine environmental scientist specialist. I've been with the department for about 27 years. And I really love halibut, but I tell you, my husband is the very much the guy who likes, I mean, he goes into a restaurant and when they say halibut on the menu, it's like, is this California halibut? Because he prefers it over Pacific halibut. So anyway, it is definitely a preferred fish in our family. Let's go round table to introduce everybody else who's here. I think everybody knows each other, but we'll just go ahead and do that anyway. So Julia, when you want to go ahead and start off, please.
Sure. I'm Julia Coates, Senior Specialist with the Marine Region in our Santa Barbara office. I am taking the lead on the stock assessment and management strategy evaluation. So that's my role currently as regard to halibut.
And our other team member helping us today is Huff McGonigal.
Hi guys, you know me. I think one of the advantages of this small group, I think, is going to be being able to have sort of informal and productive, candid conversation. So we may or may not have to stick to the script here in terms of these questions, but we have them, I think, to fall back on to stimulate discussion. But I'm definitely interested to hear the thoughts that Gilly and Jeff have on their minds.
And Gilly, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Great to see everyone. Julia, I don't know if we've ever actually met before, but it's nice to see you. I've heard your name lots and lots of times.
You too. I know. I don't think we've met in person.
And of course now, right? Nothing seems to be happening in person anymore. Anyway, it's so sad. But yes, I'm Gilly with the Pew Charitable Trusts, and have been eager to sort of track the development of this effort, and we're excited to just sort of stay involved as the scaled management effort gets underway. Presumably, hopefully, landing on an FMP at some point in the near future, and we're sort of guessing, but not to prejudge anything. And yeah, I guess I'll stop there and turn it over to Dr. Chester.
Great. Good to be here. I think I know everyone. So I'm Jeff Chester with Oceana. I've been working on some of these issues with respect to trawling and set gill nets for, I guess, the last 15 plus years or so, and studied the set gill net fishery for halibut in Mexico on the other side of the border, which is a very similar fishery to the one in California, as part of my PhD work. Also did some work on the local in Monterey Bay, the hook and line commercial fishery, and getting some characterizations done, as well as some preliminary estimates of bycatch on some observed fishing trips. So yeah, looking forward to this process. Been very engaged in the Fish and Game Commission, and this halibut scaled management approach is definitely a new focus area for my organization, Oceana, and we're dedicating resources to participate in this effort to its conclusion. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Okay, so those of you who, well, first of all, just to say that Julia is capturing notes for us today. Huff, we're just going to let her go ahead since she's got screen sharing, so people can see that.
Okay.
So you can just help me queue up some other questions if we need to. And if anybody sees some things that are on the list or in the notes that you want changed a little bit or expanded on, please go ahead and raise your hand, let us know. It looks like we may have a new person who's come in. Julie, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Julie Thayer, and I work with Farallon Institute. We're based in Central Northern California, just north of San Francisco in Petaluma. And I am currently working with CDFW and Pew Charitable Trusts on California halibut ecosystem considerations. So this is a multifaceted effort to look at effects of marine climate on halibut, predator-prey effects, and hopefully also habitat interactions.
Excellent. Thank you for being here with us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people want to go ahead and mute themselves,
could I introduce myself real quick? I'm
sorry, I did not see you, Jake. Go ahead.
It's all right. I'm Jake Todd. I'm actually a graduate student at Moss Landing Marine Labs in the Fisheries Conservation Biology Lab. And I've kind of been working on the bycatch report analysis that Kirsten kind of talked about a little bit in the previous presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. And I do see that I have Andy Rasmussen here as well. Andy, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Andy Rasmussen. I'm a commercial fisherman, fish with gill nets in Santa Barbara. And I just wanted to hear what good ideas that the NGOs are going to have on how to fix a fishery that's already totally sustainable.
Okay, so they, Sarah and Kelly directed you over here to join us?
No, I'm more concerned. I want to know what should not be a closed meeting. I want to hear what the NGOs are proposing. I don't want to talk amongst a bunch of fishermen. I want to hear what people are suggesting that we do to fix a fishery that doesn't need to be fixed.
Okay, well, welcome to the group.
Well, thank you.
Just wanted to double check on that, make sure you weren't mispointed the wrong way.
No, I'm where I want to be. Thank you.
Okay. Am I missing anybody else? Okay, excellent.
I just have a question, Julia. Is it possible to make your screen a bit larger?
Yes. Let
okay.
me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, the font is too small. There we go.
Okay, so we're going to start going through, we have these 4 different questions, and we're going to try to spend about 10 minutes on them, but if we need to spend more, we will do that. So we'll, but I'll check after 10. Okay, am I back? I am back. If we want to continue the discussion, we will continue to do that after 10 minutes. Okay, so our first question is, based on the definition within the Marine Life Management Act, what does sustainability mean to you? Based on your experience, is California halibut a sustainable fishery? So does anyone want to go ahead and start the conversation on that?
Yeah, this is Andy.
Sure, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I want to say that I've been in this fishery for 40 years, and the halibut fishing, the resources is every bit as good as it was years ago. And we've been, and you look at your landings and you see that our landings are virtually the same as they were 20 years ago. And actually we've lost about 80% of the turf, the area that we've been able to fish, and the number of fishermen is greatly reduced, and we are still catching the same amount of fish. That pretty much tells you the resource is in good shape. Thank you.
So just a quick question, Andy. So it looks like sustainability to you then is just that the resources continually staying at a level that allows you guys to fish and to, catch fish in about the same every year after year. Is that correct?
Well, basically there's less effort catching the same amount of fish. So the resource is in good shape. We are so restricted. We have lost at least 80% of the turf we can fish. Okay, so we have no impact on 80% of the halibut habitat in the state. Actually, it's probably not even that. It might even be probably closer to 5%. So the way that we are currently fishing now is a sustainable fishery. And actually, the resource is in excellent condition. I mean, there is age class, there's large fish, there's small fish, and so to say that this fishery is not in good shape and that it's not a sustainable fishery is inaccurate.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So
could I ask a clarifying question?
Sure, Julie.
Are we distinguishing the fishery between Central and Southern California? And is this the commercial trawl fishery, Andy, that you were referring to?
No, I'm involved in several fisheries, and halibut gill nets is one of the fisheries I'm involved with.
Okay.
And Southern California, there is virtually no halibut gill net fishery north of Point Conception.
Right. Thank you.
And yes, I would say that if you're thinking of talking about the sustainability of the halibut fishery, you can look at it from in regards to area. Certainly the stock assessment has a north central component and a Southern California component.
This is Jeff Shester from Oceana again. Yeah, I guess in terms of the definitions in the MLMA, we're certainly, my organization has a consistent view of sustainability with that pertains both to the target species as well as to issues related to bycatch habitat and the ecosystem. And so I think generally our main concerns in terms of sustainability are with the set gill net and the trawl gear types, consistent with the department's general findings from the risk assessment. So I think we are aware that the latest stock assessment does show some potentially concerning levels of depletion for the target species, just based on the stock assessment. But I think our primary concerns are the bycatch issues, and we're generally of the opinion, based on the data that we've seen, that the bycatch is unacceptable in terms of the definitions in the Act. We do believe that the various that the hook and line sectors, recreational and commercial hook and line, do have acceptable levels of bycatch, and from a bycatch sustainability perspective would be considered sustainable. And however, we do have very serious concerns with the bycatch in the trawl and set gill net sectors, to the point where we do not believe those do meet the definition of sustainability in terms of the impacts to other species outside the target species.
And Jake, do you want to try or mention some of what you guys are doing there on your project with the bycatch? Maybe not necessarily. I know you guys are still working up the results, but go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Like you mentioned, we're still in review, so I won't really speak too much on the results, but kind of more for the analysis, we've been tabulating and calculating kind of the total catches of California halibut, both within, we have it separated by fishery, so gill net and trawl fishery. We've been calculating the total catches of halibut, and then the total catches of any non-target species, which is essentially the definition of bycatch, as Kirsten explained it. And then we're using those, we were able to create bycatch ratios, so we can determine kind of how much of one non-target species is caught per every halibut, if that makes sense, or per every pound of halibut caught. So essentially where the ratios are kind of telling us if we're catching kind of 2 pounds of bycatch to every 1 pound of halibut or something along those lines. Those are kind of the main, our main analyses, which we've kind of been focusing on. And then we've gone more into depth on specific species which are caught in as bycatch, paying close attention to kind of the sensitive species and seeing how often those are caught, maybe per day or per set or per trawl. So that's kind of the main kind of analyses we've been focusing on for the two fisheries, gill net and trawl.
Great. So does anybody else have some thoughts on just what sustainability means to you that may be beyond what is in the MLMA, or do you, based on your experience, think that California halibut is a sustainable fishery? Gilly, did you have a thought?
Sure, yeah. Thank you. I'll chime in a little bit. I would say that I would echo a lot of what Jeff just said regarding. I think Pew is also sort of adheres to the definition of sustainability as laid out in the MLMA, and I think our interest in management of California halibut is sort of centers on some of the concerns that have been raised already around bycatch, and also some of the habitat interactions in the trawl fishery. But I think primarily the bycatch concerns that have been raised, and I think that's of course what kind of elevated the fishery in the prioritization process for the master plan for fisheries effort. And so I think that's what brings us to the conversation as well, primarily is the bycatch concerns. And so I think, because of that, with respect to both the gill net sector and the trawl sector, I would say probably we do have some grave concerns about sustainability in general. And then I think also just with respect to biomass of the target species, as I think Jeff may have mentioned, or maybe somebody else, that it sounds like there may be some concerns with respect to abundance in this sort of the southern end of the range, although I think it sounds like there's still, I know that the stock assessment isn't totally out or complete yet, but it sounds like just based on some of the public webinars that there could be some concerns there. So whether that's a question of stock sustainability / other concerns around achieving MSY, I wouldn't be able to say, but it seems like that's going to be an important thing to look at going forward in terms of how things are looking, especially for the southern end of the range, or the southern subpopulation. So I think that's probably, I'll stop there. I've prattled on long enough. Oh, and I did want to ask real quick, if it's okay while I still am off mute, if I could ask Jake one quick question about the methodology for the bycatch evaluation or bycatch assessment that you guys are doing, if that's okay. I don't want to go too far out of order. Should I just maybe hold that for now?
No, I think that's fine. I think we've been going back and forth between the first and second question here, so we're doing fine on time.
Oh, great. Thank you. Jake, thank you. That was so interesting just to hear a little bit more about the work that you guys are doing at Moss Landing. And I was just curious with respect to calculating total catches of halibut versus, and sort of doing the bycatch ratio with total catches of non-target species. Just out of curiosity, do you know if you're distinguishing between non-target species that are still marketable versus those that are not marketable, or that must be discarded, or that are otherwise not keepable?
Yeah, so kind of, for that case, it kind of depends on so we've kind of been drawing all of our data from a multitude of different data sources. So for observer data, we do have it separated based on kind of dead. So we have, within those ratios, we have 3 kind of different ratios of kind of dead, discarded dead, discarded alive, or non-target, but still kept to go to market. For the non-observer data, just going from kind of logbooks and things like that, sometimes it's hard to distinguish. We are kind of in the process of still trying to go through it and kind of go through the marketable species. But so the answer is kind of yes and no, kind of just depending on where our data was coming from, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, does anyone else want to provide some thoughts on sustainability?
I could jump more into the bycatch specifics if that's timely.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking of going next. So go ahead, Jeff.
Great. Yeah, and just following up on that last piece that Gilly and Jake mentioned about the, I believe they're kind of called incidental catch species, like those that are not the target species but are still sold and marketable. I think one of our main concerns is that terminology doesn't exist in the MLMA. There's basically either bycatch or target, and both, depending on which pathway they go down, there are different standards of sustainability, et cetera, and requirements. And so we just don't want to get those. We want to make sure those species are not lost, so that if they are indeed considered target species, they're managed, to the target species protections in the Act. And if they're bycatch species, then we looked at it based on acceptability of the bycatch as per the Act. So I think that's just, we want to make sure those incidental caught species are addressed fully in whatever the scaled management process is, because we believe they are part of the fishery. With specifics to the halibut trawl fishery, We are concerned, based on at least what we've seen from observer data and from the NOAA National Bycatch reports, that at least of the observed fisheries presented by NOAA, that this does have the highest discard rate of any observed fishery in the United States, averaging from 70 to 80% of the animals that are thrown back. From the observer data, we've seen this includes at least 130 different distinct species, including crabs, bat rays, nearshore sharks, green sturgeon, and generally fairly high mortality rates. We are concerned with the findings that the commission used to keep some of the trawl areas open in the past, that were based on a experimental study of 15-minute tows, where we've actually seen on average 2 to 4 hour tows is more typical of the fishery, which has a very different mortality rate. Many of these species are very sensitive to fishing and bycatch. Particularly, we're concerned about many of the sharks and rays that are highly vulnerable to extinction because they take many years to reach maturity and have few young. And the fact that there are also very few of these species have any stock assessments. We're also concerned with the level of Dungeness crab that is caught. I think some of our estimates looked at, on average, $2.2 million of dead Dungeness crab. If you look at just the weight of Dungeness crab that's discarded, which actually exceeds the value of the halibut that are typically sold. So there's a major concern with that. With respect to the set gill net fishery, we are concerned with the long soak times for the gill nets. They do appear to be the primary net fishery involved in entanglements of humpback and gray whales, based on recent data over the last decade or so. Reducing whale entanglements has been a major focus area for California, and the department has made huge success in reducing entanglements with Dungeness crab pot gear, as well as with drift gill nets through the transition program. However, to date, we're not aware of actions that have been taken to address the continued problem of the entanglements of whales in set gill nets. There's also, from the observer data, I think we've looked at the years that were available, a 65% discard rate with 109 distinct species, 61 of those not marketable, and at least seven protected species caught. The set gill nets catch nearly all the seabirds reported off the West Coast by fishery observers, and we understand they're the greatest mortality source to juvenile great white sharks in their nursery grounds in Southern California, as well as the rare long-lived giant sea bass, which is depleted, and we'd hope to see that recover. The fishery also kills more California sea lions than all other West Coast fisheries combined, basically, since the ban in state waters, there have been several studies now, both on fish as well as harbor porpoises. So the fish were like giant sea bass and some of the nearshore sharks. There actually has been a dramatic recovery of some of those sensitive species in the areas where the gill nets were banned. And so we're concerned about the areas where they were remaining, where the nets may still be problematic. So I guess I'll pause there in terms of just wanted to just kind of give an overview of some of the issues and some of the data that has driven our concern about the sustainability of those gear types with respect to bycatch.
Thanks, Jeff. Andy, I'm interested, what have you've been seeing in your nets when you bring in your halibut nets?
Well, I don't see any Dungeness crab. I don't know where the previous speaker comes up with the Dungeness crab and the Southern California trawl fishery.
Hang on.
Southern California gill net fishery.
Just clarify that's the trawl fishery specifically, not the set gill nets. So I'm talking about the trawl fishery.
The Southern California trawl grounds is where all these Dungeness crab are being killed. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that the California halibut fishery, particularly off of Central California, is the area. Overall, that's the trawl fishery where the Dungeness crab catch is a concern. I don't know there's many Dungeness crab in Southern California.
No, yeah, obviously. And I don't know where you come up with your numbers on whale entanglements. I am not aware of a single whale entanglement in a halibut set net in years. I don't know where you come up with that figure.
Well, so Andy, I'm curious what types of, so just to give you a little bit of background for me, I used to be on the Gill Net study project that Maria Wykovich had going in Southern California a number of years ago. And so, we did see some types of bycatch, but we saw very few marine mammals. In fact, no whales, and I think it was just one or two sea lions a year or so. So, but we did see things like, for instance, spider crabs. We've got a lot of spider crabs in our nets, that in the set nets. So I'm just curious what you've been seeing.
Well, in the past, we used to be able to sell the spider crab claws so they were completely utilized. I'm not sure where that's at now, if that has been changed. But in the past, it was on the lanyard seats that you were able to sell crab claws, and you could only sell spider crab claws. So that product was utilized in the past. I don't see that many now. But and we do catch some bat rays and some skates, and a very high percentage of those are released alive. And I don't see, with the very limited area that we are fishing in, that there's absolutely no way that we are going to endanger those species' survival. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this kind of is a little frustrating that we allow bycatch on land. What's the roadkill? What are you going to stop people from driving cars because of roadkill? Are you going to stop energy production? I mean, one of the biggest killer of birds that I'm aware of is the power plant in Prim, the Google power plant, the solar plant that is generating 800-degree air, and birds are flying through it. And by the time they hit the ground, they're dead.
Okay. So let me ask.
But I mean, this is not a perfect world.
Yeah.
There is going to be some bycatch, and there's bycatch in just about every fishery.
Let me ask this question then. What is acceptable bycatch?
An acceptable amount that is you're not endangering the survival of the species. I don't know. I mean, what's the acceptable bycatch on a highway?
I know they do.
What's the number? What's the number of tiger salamanders that you can drive over on the highway?
Right. Well.
What's the number?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to, we're not here to talk about those particular species, but you do make a point about the idea of talking about acceptable bycatch.
Right, and also, I'd like to also point out that Jeff is a big proponent of the swordfish deep set buoy gear, the transition, how huge a success that is.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a participant in that fishery, in the buoy gear fishery, and I've fished solo, no crew, for 30 years, and you cannot fish in that fishery by yourself. So I fished 14 days, hooked 2 fish, lost both of them.
Now,
I mean, I've got $15,000 invested in it, and I haven't made a nickel. So it's not like this.
Andy, can we just focus in on the questions at this point? Okay. Because everybody has their own ideas and their own perspective and some good information from everybody on this. So I really appreciate your viewpoint. I appreciate Jeff's. And I'm hopeful now that maybe we can hear from, I see Carrie Pomeroy has joined us. I don't know, Carrie, in your perspective of working with fishermen, have you dealt with any ideas on acceptable bycatch? Have your fishermen talked about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think in different, it's really different in different fisheries. And forgive me for jumping in late in the game. I think I think part of what I hear is this understanding or this sense that, look, you're out seeking to catch fish, but it's fishing, and so it's some fisheries may be more selective than others in what they initially catch. And then there's the idea of the distinction, and forgive me if I'm hashing over old ground that you guys have already covered, but this distinction between what you might call incidental catch, which still may have some value or use or can be returned to the ocean with minimal disruption to the organisms. And then there's bycatch mortality, or bycatch that is compromised, that dies or is severely injured. And so I think there's such an importance, I think, for different fisheries from the perspective of the people I've heard from on this topic of clearly distinguishing between those things. And then the other part of it is that in any food production effort that people engage in or other endeavors, there's some impact of what we do that may adversely affect something else in the system. And it does call into question, well, how much of that is acceptable as opposed to sort of like a zero tolerance kind of perspective. So anyway, so that's a couple odds and ends.
By the way, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, I know several of you. Carrie Pomeroy, Institute of Marine Sciences, UC Santa Cruz. I'm a social scientist and a researcher. I've done some work on the commercial fishery for California halibut, among other things, and have some support from Resources Legacy Fund right now, looking at the broader range of fisheries and working with Debbie. Thank you.
Just real quick, I didn't want to get into responding to the comments from before, but I think you asked about the definition of acceptable bycatch, and I was a participant, I think, as well as maybe some others on this in this group and in this meeting on the bycatch work group, and that was definitely one of the key focus areas. And I strongly suggest that there is criteria in the Act, as well as a pretty lengthy discussion of how you determine what acceptable bycatch is in the master plan, particularly the revisions. And so I would want to make sure, since those were developed as a consensus across recreational, commercial, and fishing and conservation groups, that criteria and approach to determining acceptability of bycatch is front and center in the process here, rather than inferring that somehow stakeholders get to determine a brand new set of definitions and criteria in this process.
Thanks, Jeff. I think that's it's good to come back to the to the MLMA and the master plan for sure to look at those definitions. We have about 5 minutes left, and do we want to continue on this question or actually get to one that's very close to my heart, which is to talk about what, if any, changing ocean conditions impact the California fishery over the past, say, 20 years? Is that good to go to, or do you want to finish up the 5 minutes with the bycatch? Hearing nothing, let's go to ocean conditions. So does anyone want to talk about how they've seen the California fishery, has it been impacted by these warming ocean conditions? Positive, well, and impact, I should say effect, because there may be some positive impacts.
Yeah, I'll speak up because we've been doing some climate analysis on multiple indices, and it's been difficult to determine relationships with catch because there's so many other factors going into catch, but we have found very significant, highly significant, and highly consistent relationships with juvenile indices. And these are indices from the stock assessment. So juvenile indices from both the southern and the central regions. And so unlike many species in upwelling boundary currents that may be negatively impacted by increasing sea surface temperature, these juvenile halibut tend to be more present. And so there's a significant positive relationship with sea surface temperature. And probably, as everybody knows, these halibut are recruiting in distinct pulses, and these are often associated with warming events. So we are still working on various analyses, and we'd like to refine some of these indices that we're working with. So that'll be next steps. But it's not looking as negative as perhaps we're seeing for many of the other species and fisheries.
Yeah, and I see we're getting close to the end on time. Just wanted to put in a quick a plug on the last question, which I see about recommendations. And I think we don't have any recommendations at this point, but we do want to see on the table, at least for consideration, in terms of potential ways to address bycatch, time area closures considered, as well as hard caps and increased observer coverage, gear modifications, limits on soak time or trawl tow duration, as well as transitioning to cleaner gear types that are more selective.
Great. So any last minute, we have about 50 seconds left on either of those last two questions.
If I can jump in, it's Carrie. Hi. I'm thinking, of course, about the socioeconomics or the human dimensions. And for almost everyone involved in the California halibut fishery, commercially fishing, they're involved in other fisheries. And I think it's critically important to understand the dynamics of the fishery in its own right, but also how it interacts with other fisheries so that management measures can be evaluated in that richer context. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your time here. And we're going to be